Hello, all. Today, what I want to do is talk a little bit about multilingual learners. And sometimes you might hear those called English learners, ESL, multi-language learners, a lot of different names in different states and different areas there too. But really, we're talking about students that come in maybe not being as proficient in English as we want them to be, as we're hoping they're being, from wherever they're coming from with that piece. So, what we're talking about is how do we help those students really learn mathematics and learn English in the classroom, and how do we help them to kind of integrate into the classroom and thinking about some of those pieces. We know that's often a challenge. We know a lot of teachers are not really sure what to do with them, and a lot of sure how to help those students to really help them out in the best way they can. So I'm going to offer just a couple different things today. We've got a few other things we can do too, but today what I really want to talk about is talking about consistent frameworks, consistent sentence frames, consistent ways where students kind of know what to expect. And there's a lot of research behind this talking about how do we help students to come in and say, okay, when they come into the classroom, they know what to expect. And honestly, just that one piece right there, knowing what to expect, they kind of can anticipate what's coming next. So there's less guesswork back and forth. I was actually recently on a Babbel exercise, learning some Spanish on my own, trying to figure that out, trying to improve my own skills. And I noticed the same framework happening here too, is they deliver things in Spanish and they deliver things over and over and over again in the same way, maybe presenting it with pictures, maybe sound, maybe writing, but continually using the same frameworks and same ways of looking at that. So in the math classroom, what that might look like is honestly one of the simple ways we can do that is a consistent framework, a consistent agenda as we come through the math classroom, and thinking about a lot of different ways that can look, and saying, okay, we come into the classroom and this always happens. And then we start our lesson and this always happens. And then we move into here and this always happens. And just that consistency, especially for multilingual learners, can be helpful because we come into here and I know what to expect, even if I don't understand all of the language being spoken to me. I kind of see what's coming. I can begin to anticipate what's expecting so that I'm not lost in the framework. I'm not lost in what's happening, what's the procedures. I can begin to say, okay, that's something I don't need to worry about. I can now think more about the English in front of me, or I can now think more about the math in front of me because there's one less thing that I need to worry about is what can I expect next. So that consistent framework can be a really helpful tool as we're doing that. Of course, it's helpful for all students, but really we're looking at it from that MLL lens today. So then along with that, another really good tool, really simple tool that we can use to help some learners think about, okay, how do I help them with discourse? How do I help them learn some language? And one of the ways we can do that is sentence frames or sentence starters, depends on where we're coming from, what that looks like, but offering an introduction to a conversation, an introduction to a conversation with a student beside them. And that might look something as similar as the strategy I used was. I want everyone in the classroom to say something like, the strategy I used was, or maybe a sentence like, I agree with you because, or I disagree with you because, and asking all students in the classroom to begin a sentence with this. There's a lot of different frames we can use. You can look up on Google or any other resources you have about what are some sentence frames or sentence stems or sentence frames that might make sense in your setting. Of course, at different ages and different grade levels, there's different ones that work, but these can be really beneficial in all grades for all students, helping the students to say, okay, I might not have a really deep understanding of all of the math language or all of the English language, even as we're looking at that. But these sentence stems or sentence frames can help me with that. They can help me to understand, okay, what's at least something I can say? I can say these 5 words, and then I can input my own word to kind of make it my own. And using these sentence frames and starters can be really, really helpful. And just thinking about that in with the sentence stems and sentence frames, it can also be extremely helpful to do a turn and talk. And some people use turn and talks a lot, some don't. But specifically for multilingual learners, these turn and talks are a less stress, less kind of anxiety building. Is I just have two students talking to each other. There's not a whole lot of attention being put to the student. They can practice, they can kind of rehearse some different things, they can kind of go back and forth and build some skills. There's a lot of research behind students just talking to each other can be really helpful to build those skills. So coupling that with a sentence stem or a sentence frame, and coupling that with, I know there's one of those coming because this is the framework we do every day. All of that consistency can really help the students to begin to learn language, begin to hear repeated language they hear over and over again. And again, they'll have some consistent academic, some consistent social language they begin to hear. And then we can work on some of the math language and work on some of those skills. So as we're thinking about this, think about your multilingual learners and think about, do I offer opportunities for those students to have consistency in the framework? Do I have opportunities for students to use some turn and talk, some sentence stems, sentence frames, where they can both hear those sentence stems and sentence frames, and they can both speak those sentence stems and sentence frames, or possibly even get it into writing. So if you do have multilingual learners, try that out. Of course, it works for everyone in all settings. That universal design for learning can be really helpful. But those are some skills you might want to try out. So give those a try. Let me know how it works. If you have other ideas that work, please feel free to share that. I always learn a lot from educators too across the country and finding out different ways we can do that. All right, all. Have a great day.